The gunshot tore through the canyon like a scream in the wind before Eli even saw her stumble over the jagged rocks. Sylvie's dress, once pale blue, was soaked in blood, torn across the shoulder and down her side. Her boots skidded against loose stones as she tried to climb, but exhaustion and pain betrayed her. She collapsed, panting, the metallic tang of blood thick in the dry desert air. Above her, the canyon cliffs loomed, shadowed and jagged, stretching like silent sentinels against the early morning sun. Eli, crouched on a narrow ledge, froze. His sharp eyes took in the scene, her frailty, the crimson streaks, the desperate fear that radiated from her trembling body. "Don't let me die," she whispered, voice hoarse, barely audible above the wind that stirred loose dust and the faint cries of unseen coyotes. Her wide, terrified eyes locked onto his, pleading for salvation. Eli's heart tightened. He had tracked outlaws through these canyons countless times, but nothing had prepared him for this, the raw fragility of life suspended on a knife's edge. Without a second thought, he scrambled down the jagged rocks, each movement careful, deliberate, his bare feet gripping stone edges. The weight of his ancestors pressed on him, the desert whispering their guidance in the wind. As he reached her side, he assessed the wound, a deep gash along her ribs, the fabric of her dress sticking to the dark red streaks. Eli tore strips from his own shirt, tying them into crude bandages. The fabric smelled faintly of smoke and earth, but it would have to do. His hands were steady, precise, though the heat of the desert sun made them slick with sweat. Each touch burned her skin, but the thought of leaving her there was unbearable. Sylvie gasped as he pressed the makeshift bandage over her wound, biting her lip to suppress a cry. "They'll come back," she whispered, voice trembling. "The men who did this, they'll find me." "They won't touch you while I'm here," Eli said, voice low but unyielding, a promise carved from his years of survival and fight. He shifted her gently, supporting her weight against his shoulder. Each step was painstaking, rocks cutting into his palms and knees, but he ignored the pain. She leaned into him, shivering, trembling from both blood loss and shock. The canyon walls stretched upward, narrow and unforgiving, shadows pooling in deep crevices. The desert around them was alive with sound, the rattle of loose stones, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of the wind over parched earth. Each noise reminded them both that the wilderness was merciless, a predator as deadly as the outlaws who had left Sylvie for dead Dot as he found a slightly sheltered nook beneath an overhang. Eli lowered her gently to the ground. He could feel her heartbeat, rapid and uneven, beneath her thin blouse. He pressed his hands against her side, checking the bandage, adjusting it to stem the bleeding. "You're going to be all right," he murmured. Though he knew the night was far from over, Sylvie tried to speak, her lips trembling. Who are you?" "Someone who won't let you die," he replied, eyes scanning the canyon rim for signs of movement. He knew the outlaws had likely followed her trail, and they would be back if they suspected she survived. For a moment, the desert seemed to hold its breath. The sun climbed higher, casting shafts of golden light across the canyon floor, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits. Sylvie closed her eyes briefly, exhausted, the heat prickling her skin. She shivered, and Eli draped his jacket over her shoulders, the fabric warm from the sun but offering some comfort. Through the tension, a strange calm settled over him. Years of survival had taught him to react quickly, to fight, to track, but nothing had taught him to feel this urgent, desperate need to protect someone so fragile, yet so stubbornly alive. Sylvie, despite the blood and fear, radiated a defiance that stirred something unfamiliar in him, a sense of responsibility, maybe even hope. As the day wore on, he kept watch, shifting slightly to keep the sun off her face while keeping an eye on the canyon's entrances. Sylvie whispered fragments of her story, how bandits had stormed her ranch, left her for dead, and how the sheriff had turned a blind eye. Eli listened, the anger for the injustice mixing with the fear for her life. The canyon stretched wide, silent witnesses to her pain and his resolve. Every second mattered, every heartbeat a reminder that survival here was not guaranteed. And in that unforgiving landscape, Eli made a vow to the wind, to the stars, to her trembling form. He would not let her die. The canyon narrowed as Eli carried Sylvie through a hidden ravine, the walls closing in like silent guards. Her weight was light but unsteady, and he could feel the tremor of her exhaustion in every step. Loose stones crunched underfoot, sending tiny avalanches of dust down the canyon walls. Eli kept his senses sharp, every rustle of desert brush. Every distant howl could signal danger. Finally, the ravine opened into a small oasis, a hidden spring fed by trickling water cascading from a jagged rock ledge above. The sound of the song and the fawn de fathom. Waterfall was soft but steady, a lullaby in the heart of the desert. Sylvie's trembling hands reached toward the cool water, and Eli knelt beside her, holding her steady. He could smell the minerals of the stone and the faint earthy scent of wet moss, so unusual in the arid canyon air. "Drink," Eli urged gently, tilting the spring water to her lips. She drank slowly, shivering, and he wrapped his jacket around her shoulders, the fabric carrying the warm scent of sun-baked leather and his own sweat. He noticed the faint scars along her forearms and the stubborn dirt streaked into her hair. She had survived more than anyone should have, and the sight filled him with both admiration and concern. This place. "It's like a secret," Sylvie murmured, her voice weak but grateful. "How did you find it?" "I know the canyons," Eli said simply. His dark eyes scanned the rim above them, alert for movement. "It's hidden safe for now, but we can't stay long." He adjusted the torn bandage along her side, making sure it stayed tight enough to stop the bleeding but loose enough to allow her to breathe. Sylvie's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed, the tension of the night before still heavy on her. They came so close. "I thought I was done for." She swallowed hard, her throat dry. "And no one cared." "They care now," Eli said, his voice low and steady. "I won't let them touch you again." His words were a promise, carved from the iron of his resolve. The Apache warrior in him, the hunter, the protector, the survivor stood vigilant, every muscle tensed beneath his bare chest. Feathers and beads in his long black hair caught the morning light as he crouched beside her, ready for anything. The spring was deceptively calm, but Eli knew better. The bandits would not forgive a failed hunt, and the sheriff's negligence had left Sylvie exposed. He scanned the surrounding cliffs, noting vantage points and escape routes, calculating every possible approach the outlaws might take. He had trained for moments like this, for situations where lives hung in the balance between skill and instinct. Sylvie, for all her fragility, had survived the first night, and that gave him hope and fear. "Eli, what if they find us?" she whispered, her fingers clutching his jacket. Her voice was raw, trembling like the leaves of the mesquite overhead. "They won't," he said firmly, though he could not entirely banish the thought. "We move before night falls. The canyon has its secrets, and I know them all." As the day wore on, Eli showed her how to move silently along the rocks, how to spot the faint tracks of animals and people alike. The sun beat down, painting the stones a blinding white and casting deep shadows into every crevice. Sylvie's dress, patched and smeared with dried blood, fluttered in the hot breeze, and the scent of sweat and dust mingled with the faint aroma of desert flowers clinging stubbornly to cracks in the rocks. By late afternoon, they had fortified the spring as best they could, using rocks and branches to create a crude barrier against prying eyes. Sylvie sat against a boulder, exhausted, and Eli kept watch, scanning the horizon as the canyon shadows grew longer. Every whisper of the wind, every distant coyote howl, set his senses on edge. And yet, in that moment, there was a fragile calm. Sylvie had survived the initial attack. The hidden spring offered sanctuary, and Eli was unwavering in his promise to protect her. The canyon, relentless and unforgiving, had given them a brief reprieve, a chance to breathe, to heal, to prepare for whatever horrors the desert would throw at them next. As the sun dipped behind the cliffs, casting gold and crimson over the canyon walls, Sylvie closed her eyes for the first time since the attack. Eli remained at her side, his shadow stretching over her like a protective barrier. The outlaws were still out there, but for now, the hidden spring whispered a lullaby of survival. And Eli's vow echoed louder than the canyon itself. He would not let her die. Night fell like a heavy blanket over the canyon, swallowing the sun's golden warmth and replacing it with a chill that seeped into bones. Eli led Sylvie carefully up a narrow, winding path that climbed to a rocky plateau overlooking the canyon below. Her legs wobbled, fatigue and pain slowing her steps, but his steady hand on her elbow gave her balance and the unspoken reassurance that he would not let her fall. The plateau was a jagged crown of stone overlooking the winding canyon trails, where the outlaws might still be searching. From this vantage point, the desert seemed vast, endless, and indifferent. The smell of dry earth mixed with the sharp scent of sagebrush and the faint metallic tang of Sylvie's blood still lingering on her torn dress. Her breaths came shallow and rapid, and the moonlight glinted off the beads and feathers in Eli's long black hair, emphasizing the power in his bare, muscular form. They settled behind a low rock formation that offered a partial shield from Favos, the night wind. Eli crouched, eyes scanning every shadow and movement. His hands rested lightly on his weapons, trained and ready, but his attention remained on Sylvie. "You need to rest," he said quietly, his voice carrying authority yet gentleness. "I'll keep watch." Sylvie leaned against the rock, her fingers brushing over the jagged stone as if grounding herself. Her chest rose and fell unevenly, the adrenaline of the day still coursing through her veins. I can't stop thinking," she admitted, voice trembling. "What if they come back? What if I don't make it?" Eli's dark eyes softened. "I told you," he said, "you won't die while I'm here." His words were a vow etched into the desert wind, and yet they carried more than protection. They carried a promise that survival meant more than simply existing. It meant fighting, preparing, and never letting fear take root. As the first hour of night passed, distant sounds echoed through the canyon, the faint clatter of rocks, a low coyote howl, the whisper of wind through the mesa. Eli's instincts sharpened. He could feel every vibration in the earth, every shift in shadow, every subtle change in Sylvie's posture. Survival here required constant vigilance. One lapse could mean death. He taught her quietly, gently, how to move without alerting unseen. Eyes, step lightly, place weight evenly, listen with your whole body. Sylvie mimicked his movements, slow and deliberate, learning to trust not only him but her own senses. Her fear remained, but a spark of determination kindled in her chest. For the first time since the attack, she felt capable of survival. Hours passed. The plateau grew colder and Sylvie's shivering intensified. Eli draped his jacket over her. Shoulders again, the fabric warm from the sun earlier but now offering some comfort against the night chill. His bare chest, muscles taut and glistening faintly in the moonlight, reflected a lifetime of survival, the strength of an Apache warrior tempered by experience and vigilance. Suddenly, movement caught Eli's eye, a faint flicker of shadow along the canyon rim. He signaled silently to Sylvie to remain still, pressing his hand gently over hers. His gaze sharpened, ears straining for the faintest sound of pursuit. Nothing yet, but the canyon never truly slept. Danger lingered in every crevice, in every whisper of wind. "I'm scared," Sylvie admitted, her voice small but resolute. "You should be," L.A. replied, "but fear is just another tool if you know how to use it." He adjusted the makeshift barrier of stones and brush they had set up, ensuring any approach would be slowed or revealed. He moved silently, every step measured, every breath controlled. By midnight, the desert sounds had grown quieter, almost hypnotic: the distant owl, the rustle of small desert creatures, the sighing wind weaving between the cliffs. Sylvie rested her head against his shoulder, exhaustion finally overtaking her. Eli kept watch, every sense alert, his dark eyes scanning the canyon floor, hands resting near his weapons but also near her, ready to defend. And in the quiet tension of the plateau night, the bond between them deepened. Sylvie realized survival was no longer a solitary act. She had someone who would fight beside her, protect her, and endure the desert's perils alongside her. For Eli, the presence of this woman, frightened but unbroken, kindled a new sense of purpose. The night stretched on, endless and watchful. But atop that plateau, with the moon casting silver over the rocks and Eli's dark form guarding her, Sylvie allowed herself, for the first time, to believe she might survive and perhaps even live beyond the terror of yesterday. The night stretched deep and still, but Eli's instincts never slept. From the jagged plateau, he could feel the shift in the air, the subtle vibrations of hooves far below, the faint scent of sweat and smoke. The outlaws had not given up, and their approach was inevitable. Sylvie, leaning weakly against a boulder, stiffened as Eli placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," he whispered, voice low and steady, his dark eyes scanning the canyon below. The first shadows of horsemen appeared on the winding trails, moving silently at first, then breaking into a slow gallop as they neared the plateau. Eli's bare muscles tensed under the moonlight, his long black hair whipping in the night wind. Beads and feathers in his hair caught glints of silver light, signaling the presence of a warrior who belonged to the land he defended. His hands rested on his weapons, trained and ready, but his attention never left Sylvie. "Eli, what do we do?" she whispered, her voice trembling, lips pale under the moonlight. "We fight smart, not hard," he said. "The canyon is our advantage. We'll control the battlefield." He moved silently, positioning rocks and broken branches to create traps and obstacles along the narrow paths the outlaws would be forced to use. Every step was precise, a calculation of movement, shadow, and surprise. Sylvie watched him, a mixture of awe and terror in her eyes. She had seen strength before, but never such raw, disciplined power, and never so intensely protective. The first horse reared as an arrow struck just ahead of it, its rider swearing and swinging a gun wildly. Eli's movements were a blur: arrows, loosed with pinpoint accuracy, fists and feet striking with lethal precision. Dust and sand rose into the air as rocks tumbled down the cliffs, creating chaos among the approaching riders. The canyon seemed alive, echoing with the roar of hooves, shouts, and the metallic crack of gunfire. Sylvie ducked behind a boulder, heart pounding, watching Eli move like a phantom among the rocks. Each motion was controlled, a deadly dance of survival. His bare chest gleamed under the moonlight, muscles taut and rippling, feathers and beads swaying with every step. The outlaws faltered, their confidence breaking against his skill and knowledge of the terrain. One rider, braver or perhaps more foolish than the rest, charged up the narrow trail toward the plateau. Eli met him head-on, using his momentum to send the man tumbling, the gun clattering uselessly against stone. Another outlaw tried to flank them, but Eli anticipated the movement, launching a rock that struck the man's horse, halting the charge. The desert echoed with the struggle shouts, curses, and the clatter of hooves against jagged rock. Through it all, Eli's eyes never left Sylvie. Every movement he made, every calculated strike, was designed not only to stop the attackers, but to shield her from harm. She could barely breathe, the adrenaline mixing with fear, yet a strange trust began to root itself deep in her chest. She understood in a visceral way that he would not let her die. Minutes stretched like hours, the fight raging across the narrow plateau and winding canyon paths. Dust, sweat, and the tang of blood filled the air. And then, finally, the outlaws faltered, their numbers thinned, courage broken by Eli's unrelenting precision and the unforgiving terrain. The remaining riders turned their horses, fleeing into the darkness, leaving only the echoes of their retreat. Sylvie collapsed against Eli, trembling, tears streaking the dirt on her cheeks. I thought we were done for," she whispered, voice shaking. "You survived," Eli said simply, his dark eyes meeting hers, unwavering. "That's what matters." He adjusted the jacket around her shoulders, brushing her hair back gently. For a moment, the world was quiet except for the distant calls of desert night creatures and the heavy, steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his side. The plateau, once tense and chaotic, now lay bathed in moonlight, silent except for the wind through the rocks. Sylvie could see the power, discipline, and soul of the Apache warrior who had saved her. She realized survival was no longer just about staying alive, it was about trust, bond, and the knowledge that some people would risk everything for another's life. Eli stood for a moment, silhouetted against the silver moon, muscles taut, hair and feathers swaying in the night breeze, eyes scanning the canyon one last time. Then, turning to Sylvie, he offered a small, rare smile, a promise that the fight was far from over, but that she would not face it alone. The plateau was quiet now, save for the soft sigh of the wind through the rocks and the distant coyote calls. The outlaws had retreated, leaving only the echoes of their chaos behind. Sylvie sat against a boulder, her legs trembling, her pale blue dress torn and streaked with dried blood. The adrenaline that had kept her upright for hours was fading, leaving her shivering in exhaustion. Eli remained crouched beside her, muscles taut even in repose, eyes scanning the canyon one last time. Moonlight glinted off his long black hair, feathers and beads swaying slightly in the cool night breeze. His chest rose and fell in steady, controlled breaths, but the tension in his posture betrayed the vigilance that had never left him. He was still ready to fight, still ready to protect her, even though the immediate threat had vanished. "You're safe for now," he said quietly, brushing a stray lock of hair from Sylvie's face. She leaned into his hand instinctively, the warmth of his skin grounding her in the moment. I can't believe you did all that," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I thought I was done for. I thought—" Her words faltered as tears pricked her eyes. "You survived." Eli interrupted gently, voice firm yet calm. "That's what matters. Everything else, the rest of it, we'll face together." His dark eyes held a rare softness, a glimmer of something beyond the warrior's edge of promise, a reassurance, a silent vow. Sylvie swallowed hard, tracing the lines of his muscular arm with her fingers, noticing how strong and unwavering he was. I've never met anyone like you," she admitted, her voice barely audible. You'd fight for a stranger like me?" "I don't leave people behind," he said simply, gaze drifting to the canyon below, still alert to the slightest movement, especially someone who's hurt. That's not just survival, that's honor. She leaned against him, exhaustion finally overtaking fear. The chill of the night pressed against her, but the heat radiating from Eli's body warmed her. She realized then that survival wasn't just about keeping her body alive, it was about having someone to trust, someone who would endure the desert's merciless trials with her. Hours passed in a tense silence, broken only by the whispers of wind and the occasional rustle of nocturnal desert creatures. Eli shifted occasionally, adjusting Sylvie so she remained comfortable, all the while scanning the canyon. His vigilance never faltered. The warrior in him refused to rest until she was truly safe. Finally, Sylvie spoke, her voice a quiet murmur. "In the darkness, I never thought I'd feel safe again." "You are," Eli said, the certainty in his tone unwavering. "As long as I'm here, you are." He offered her a faint, rare smile, one that carried both reassurance and unspoken understanding. For the first time since the attack, Sylvie allowed herself to relax slightly. The tension that had gripped her chest eased, replaced by a fragile sense of hope. She could feel the bond forming between them, a connection forged in the crucible of danger and survival. Strengthened by trust and shared fear. Eli finally leaned back, his eyes scanning the horizon one last time before settling on her. "We'll move before dawn," he said. "There's a place not far from here, a cave with a hidden spring. We can rest there during the day. The canyon will be safer under cover, and the sun won't betray us to anyone who might still be looking." Sylvie nodded, her body exhausted, but her spirit bolstered by his presence. I'll follow you," she said quietly. "Wherever you go, I'll follow." Eli's jaw tightened slightly, a mixture of resolve and a hint of something softer passing across his features. He had protected her, guided her, and fought for her life. And now, in the quiet aftermath, he realized the depth of responsibility he felt not just for her survival, but for her trust, her fragile heart, and the unspoken bond that had formed between them. The moonlight cast long, silver shadows across the plateau, illuminating the dirt-streaked, torn dress and the warrior crouched beside her. It was a moment of calm after chaos, a brief reprieve in a world that had been relentless and cruel. And in that quiet, fragile peace, Sylvie knew something that went beyond gratitude. She knew she could trust him with her life, and perhaps, with her heart. Eli adjusted the jacket around her shoulders one final time, glancing at the canyon trails below. The fight had ended for now, but the desert was merciless, and they both knew the danger was far from gone. Still, with trust forged and a bond forming in the crucible of survival, they faced the night together stronger, steadier, and more determined than before. The first rays of dawn painted the canyon in soft hues of gold and crimson, casting long shadows across the jagged plateau. Sylvie stirred, her body sore and stiff, but the quiet morning offered a reprieve from the relentless tension of the night. Eli, still shirtless, his muscular frame taut and powerful, adjusted the jacket around her shoulders. The feathers and beads in his long black hair glimmered faintly in the sunlight, a living testament to his Apache heritage. "Can you stand?" Eli asked, his voice low but firm, eyes scanning the canyon as always. Sylvie nodded slowly, testing her legs. The wound along her side still throbbed, but the makeshift bandage had held. I think so," she said, her voice hoarse but determined. She had survived the outlaw's attack, and for the first time since it began, she felt a spark of agency, a desire to reclaim what had been stolen. Eli offered his arm, and she leaned on him as they descended carefully from the plateau toward a narrow ravine he had scouted the previous night. The canyon below was alive with shadows and light, the desert's harsh beauty stretching endlessly. Every step Eli took was deliberate, a blend of caution and agility honed through years of survival in this unforgiving land. As they approached a hidden crevice, Eli paused. "This place has been in my family for generations," he said, voice carrying a note of reverence. "A hidden spring, a shelter from the desert. We can rest here safely during the day." Sylvie glanced around at the rocky alcove. A faint trickle of water cascaded down moss-covered stones, forming a small pool. The air was cool and damp, scented, with earth and stone, a stark contrast to the arid canyon outside. "It's beautiful," she whispered. And safe. Eli knelt beside the spring, scooping up water in his hands and offering it to her. "Drink," he said, watching her carefully. She drank slowly, letting the cool water soothe the parched throat and burning inside from last night's terror. "Eli." "Why help me?" Sylvie asked quietly, her eyes meeting his. "You didn't know me. You didn't have to fight for me." He remained silent for a long moment, then spoke softly. "Because it's who I am. Because I know what it's like to be left behind, to be hunted, to survive when the world doesn't care. And because no one deserves to die alone in the desert." His dark eyes were steady, unwavering, but there was a depth there, pain and experience, honor, and loss. Sylvie studied him, her heart caught between fear, gratitude, and an emerging trust. I want to reclaim my ranch," she said. "I want to face those outlaws, but I can't do it alone." "You won't," Eli replied firmly. "We'll face them together, but first you need to heal. The desert won't forgive weakness, and neither will they." His hands adjusted her bandage once more, and for a fleeting moment his fingers brushed against her skin. A spark passed between them, electric and unspoken, but neither spoke of it. The survival of the moment mattered, more than desire. Hours passed and the desert grew hotter. Sylvie learned from Eli how to move silently, how to listen to the canyon, how to read tracks in sand and stone. Each lesson was a mixture of practicality and trust, a bond forming in the crucible of necessity. She began to understand the depth of Eli's skill, the discipline of his warrior spirit, and the quiet ferocity that made him so formidable. As the sun climbed higher, a faint sound reached their ears, the distant rhythmic clatter of hooves on stone. Eli tensed immediately, eyes narrowing. "Not them," he murmured. "Something else." From the canyon below, a lone rider emerged, mounted on a black horse, dust swirling around them. The figure paused, shading their eyes against the sun, scanning the plateau. Sylvie clutched Eli's arm, heart pounding. "Who is it?" Eli didn't answer immediately. Instead, he observed, calculating, every instinct alert. The desert had taught him patience, and he knew the visitor's purpose would reveal itself soon. Whatever came next, Eli would protect Sylvie, and together they would face it, the secrets of the desert, the dangers that lurked, and the challenges yet to come. The plateau and hidden spring became a silent witness to their unspoken understanding. In a world of peril, survival depended on trust, skill, and the unbreakable bond forged between two souls against the desert's cruelty. The sun hung low over the canyon, casting long, fiery shadows across the jagged rocks. Sylvie clutched the edge of her torn, blood-stained pale blue dress, the fabric damp with sweat and dust. Her heart pounded in her chest as she peered across the plateau. The outlaws had regrouped, and now they were coming not as shadows in the distance, but in full force, their horses kicking up clouds of sand and grit. Eli crouched beside her, his muscular, shirtless body taut and coiled like a panther, feathers and beads in his long black hair catching the golden light. His dark eyes were sharp, scanning the canyon floor and the cliffs above for any sign of ambush. He moved with a predator's grace, every muscle and sinew honed for survival, for protection. Sylvie could feel his presence beside her like a shield, powerful, unwavering, and terrifyingly beautiful. "They're too many," Sylvie whispered, voice trembling, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. "I can't." "You can," Eli said firmly, his voice a low growl of certainty. "Stay behind me. Trust me. I won't let you die." His words were more than reassurance. They were a vow, carved from the blood and sweat of a lifetime in the desert. The first horseman appeared over a rise, gun drawn, eyes narrowed. Eli sprang forward with a fluid, almost supernatural motion. In an instant, the man was disarmed, unseated, rolling down the jagged rocks. Another rider charged, but Eli anticipated him, hurling a rock with pinpoint accuracy that struck the horse's flank, sending it skidding sideways. The canyon erupted into chaos, gunfire, shouts, the pounding of hooves on stone. Dust swirled around them like a living storm. Sylvie stumbled as adrenaline surged, and Eli grabbed her arm, yanking her behind a boulder just as a bullet struck the rock where her head had been moments before. "Don't move," he commanded, his voice low. And lethal, the Apache warrior's focus absolute. His muscular frame glistened with sweat and dust, chest rising and falling rapidly, muscles rippling as he fought with precision and deadly strength. Amid the chaos, Sylvie caught sight of Eli's eyes, dark, intense, and unwavering. She saw the sheer ferocity and determination in every movement. The warrior who had saved her life more than once, now laying it all on the line. And for the first time, she truly understood the depth of his promise. "Eli," she shouted, panic and fear blending with desperation. "Don't let me die." The words cut through the noise, and Eli's response was immediate. With a roar, he launched himself at the nearest rider, disarming him in a flurry of controlled violence. Another outlaw tried to flank them, but Eli anticipated it, striking the man's horse with a well-aimed stone and toppling the rider. Outlaws faltered, fear spreading as the legend of the muscular, shirtless Apache warrior with long black hair and tribal jewelry became real before their eyes. Minutes stretched into an eternity. The plateau became a stage of survival, dust and blood mingling with sweat and determination. And then, finally, silence. The remaining outlaws fled, leaving the plateau empty except for the echo of hooves fading into the canyon. Sylvie sank to her knees, trembling, tears falling freely. Eli approached, his chest rising and falling with exertion, feathers swaying in the wind. He knelt beside her, wrapping his arms around her, and she felt the full weight of relief and gratitude crash over her. "You," she whispered, voice breaking, "you saved me." "I promised," Eli said simply, dark eyes softening for the first time in days. "I told you I wouldn't let you die." She looked up at him, truly seeing him for the first time, not just the warrior, not just the protector, but the man who had risked everything for her life. I trust you," she said quietly, her hand brushing against his chest, feeling the hard, unwavering muscles beneath. Eli's rare, faint smile touched his lips, the warrior's fierceness softening into something gentler, something human. Together, they stood atop the plateau, the desert wind swirling around them, the blood-stained dress a testament to survival, and the canyon stretching endlessly beyond a world of danger, beauty, and the unbreakable bond they had forged. And for Sylvie, for Eli, for the lives they had saved and the battles they had fought, the plateau was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place of hope, trust, and a promise carved into the desert itself. They would face the world together, and no one would let the other die.